In a stunning display of strategic resolve, the United States Army has deployed a highly specialized task force of 4,500 elite troops to a secure military installation in eastern Poland, just a few dozen miles from the Ukrainian border. This is not a routine troop rotation or a planned exercise. It is a rapid, deliberate, and powerful act of force projection designed to send an unmistakable message to the Russian Federation. The operation, which was executed with extraordinary speed and secrecy, involved a continuous aerial chain of C-17 Globemaster III transport aircraft, the workhorse of the U.S. Air Force's Global Airlift Command. For 3 days, these logistical behemoths landed at a forward operating site in Poland, offloading pallet after pallet of equipment and hundreds of highly trained paratroopers. The task force is comprised of elements from the 82nd Airborne Division and other special operations units, a composition that signals a clear and specific purpose to provide a lethal, flexible, and immediate response to any further escalation of the war in Ukraine. This is a profound shift in U.S. strategy, moving from an emphasis on deterrence through long-range weapon systems to a direct ground-level threat to Russian military operations. The decision to deploy a unit from the 82nd Airborne is a key part of the strategic messaging. The 82nd Airborne is the core of the U.S. Army's Global Response Force, a unit capable of deploying its main body anywhere in the world within 18 hours. Its motto, All American, and its reputation as the ultimate death-from-above unit are symbols of American military power. The troops are not heavily armed with tanks or armored personnel carriers, but with light infantry vehicles, artillery, and a full complement of advanced anti-armor and anti-aircraft systems. This is a force designed not to hold territory in a conventional sense, but to conduct airborne assaults, raids, and close-quarters combat. Their presence so close to the front lines of the conflict in Ukraine is a direct challenge to Russia. It says to Moscow that the U.S. is not only willing to defend NATO's eastern flank, but is also prepared to project force into the very heart of the conflict if a line is crossed. The specific composition of the force, emphasizing flexibility and speed over sheer firepower, indicates that Washington is prepared for a range of contingencies, from a limited crossbar incident to a more significant escalation. This extraordinary deployment was triggered by a specific recent event that pushed the conflict into a new, dangerous phase. In recent days, Russian long-range missiles, presumably fired from a strategic bomber or a submarine in the Black Sea, struck a humanitarian aid convoy near the Ukrainian city of Lviv. The attack not only resulted in a tragic loss of life, but also demonstrated Russia's willingness to strike targets in western Ukraine, a region that Moscow has previously claimed to be out of the combat zone. The attack on a humanitarian convoy, which was operating in close proximity to the Polish border, was seen in Washington as a direct and deliberate act of provocation. It was a test of the West's resolve, and the U.S. response was this unprecedented deployment. The message is clear. If Russia continues to expand the scope of its attacks, it will now be faced with a highly mobile and lethal ground force on its doorstep, a force capable of a rapid and overwhelming response. This is a direct consequence of Russia's decision to escalate the conflict. The immediate reaction from all parties was one of stunned disbelief, followed by a scramble for a coordinated response. The government in Warsaw, a staunch U.S. ally and the main logistical hub for aid to Ukraine, publicly welcomed the deployment. Polish President Karol Nawrocki issued a statement declaring that the presence of U.S. troops serves as a powerful and necessary deterrent to Russian aggression. In Moscow, the reaction was predictably furious. The Russian Foreign Ministry summoned the U.S. ambassador to deliver a formal high-level protest, accusing the U.S. of preparing the ground for a direct confrontation. State-run media immediately began a campaign of disinformation, claiming the U.S. was staging a provocation to justify its own military buildup in the region. The Russian military, for its part, put its forces in Belarus and its western military district on a heightened state of alert. Aerial reconnaissance and electronic warfare activities along the Poland-Ukraine border were increased dramatically. The deployment of this elite U.S. force has therefore not only altered the strategic landscape, but has also brought the world to the brink of a new and deeply unpredictable phase of the conflict. The gathering of these troops is more than just a military move. It is a profound declaration that the rules of engagement have just changed and the stakes have never been higher. The deployment of 4,500 elite U.S. troops to the Poland-Ukraine border has gone far beyond a simple show of force. It is a calculated act of strategic deterrence, a move that fundamentally changes the tactical landscape and sets a new unambiguous red line for Russia. While the force is not large enough to engage in a conventional ground war against the Russian military, its true purpose lies in its specialized capabilities. This is not a defensive army of tanks and heavy artillery. It is a rapid reaction force designed for speed, precision, and overwhelming lethality. Elements from the 82nd Airborne Division, along with other specialized units, are experts in airborne assaults, reconnaissance, and direct action raids. Their presence signals a willingness to engage in a new kind of warfare, one that could target Russian logistics, disrupt command and control nodes, or conduct ambushes on high-value targets. This is the difference between static deterrence and active forward-deployed force projection. Moscow is now forced to operate with the knowledge that any further escalation could result in a direct lethal encounter with highly trained and technologically superior American forces. A scenario they have gone to great lengths to avoid. The tactical implications for both sides are immense. For the US-led task force, the mission is to create a tripwire on the border. Their goal is not to stop a tank column, but to act as a first responder to any cross-border incident. They are equipped with advanced anti-tank and anti-aircraft systems, capable of inflicting significant damage on a larger force and buying time for heavier NATO forces to be deployed. The task force would also be a powerful tool for intelligence gathering and reconnaissance using specialized sensors, drones, and human intelligence to monitor Russian activity on the other side of the border. They could also serve as a mobile lethal deterrent to any Russian special operations forces or other saboteurs attempting to infiltrate Poland. The very presence of this force forces Russia to commit more resources to security and surveillance on their side of the border, draining their already stretched resources. The game has now become a high-stakes, real-time chess match where one misstep could have catastrophic consequences. The deployment has also brought a new level of friction and debate within the NATO alliance. While countries on the eastern flank, such as Poland and the Baltic states, have welcomed the troops as a much-needed assurance of American commitment, other key members like Germany and France have expressed a more cautious tone. For them, the presence of a US force so close to the front lines increases the risk of a miscalculation that could draw the entire alliance into a full-scale war with Russia. They argue that while deterrence is necessary, it must be carefully calibrated to avoid pushing Russia into a corner. This internal debate highlights the long-standing divide within NATO between nations that feel an immediate threat from Russia and those who are more geographically removed and prioritize de-escalation. The US, by taking this unilateral action, has forced the issue and reasserted its leadership role in the alliance, regardless of the concerns of its more hesitant partners. In Moscow, the reaction has been a blend of political fury and tactical caution. The Kremlin has openly accused the US of preparing a direct military intervention, and its state-run media has launched a disinformation campaign aimed at portraying the US deployment as a hostile act of aggression. But behind the rhetoric, the Russian military is in a state of high alert. Reports from Russian defense outlets indicate that units in Belarus and the Kaliningrad Oblast have been placed on heightened readiness. Russia is likely to respond with a range of countermeasures, including the deployment of additional tactical air assets and electronic warfare units. These EW units would attempt to jam US communications, disrupt drone operations, and blind their reconnaissance systems. Moscow may also use its own special operations forces to conduct surveillance on the US troops, setting the stage for a tense, low-level conflict that could erupt at any moment. The psychological impact on Russian commanders is significant. They now have to operate with the knowledge that a highly mobile and lethal force is poised to strike from their flank. For Ukraine, the deployment of the US troops is an immense psychological boost. It is a clear sign that Washington is fully committed to their defense and is willing to back up its promises with action. The presence of this force could embolden Ukrainian commanders to launch more ambitious offensives, knowing that they have a powerful and effective deterrent force standing by to protect their rear and flank. It also strengthens the logistical support lines that are crucial to the Ukrainian war effort, as the US force is likely to be involved in protecting key supply routes. The deployment, therefore, serves a dual purpose. It deters Russia, and it enables Ukraine. This single act has turned the war on its head, replacing the slow, grinding conflict with a new and dangerous period of high-stakes tension and strategic maneuvering. The deployment of 4,500 elite U.S. troops to the Polish-Ukrainian border has created a new and dangerous reality, one that places all parties on a knife's edge. The world is now watching to see if this unprecedented show of force will lead to a successful de-escalation or a catastrophic miscalculation. The endgame for this high-stakes standoff is far from certain, and the path forward is fraught with risk. For the United States and its NATO allies, the best-case scenario is that the deployment serves as a powerful deterrent. In this outcome, the sheer presence and lethal capability of the U.S. task force would compel Moscow to reassess its strategy. Russia, unwilling to risk a direct ground-level confrontation with American forces, would pull back its most aggressive elements from the border and cease its long-range missile strikes in western Ukraine. The U.S. troops would maintain a high state of readiness, their presence becoming a permanent part of the European security architecture. This would represent a fundamental and successful shift in strategic deterrence, where the threat of force, rather than its use, achieves a decisive political objective. However, a far more dangerous scenario looms: the possibility of an accidental conflict in an environment of heightened tension. A single mistake could ignite a full-scale war. A stray artillery round, a drone with a malfunctioning GPS, or a misidentified aircraft could lead to a small-scale exchange of fire. Given the proximity and the hair-trigger readiness of both sides, a minor incident could rapidly escalate into a major confrontation. The US and Russia both have protocols to de-escalate, but in the heat of the moment, with troops on high alert and the pressure immense, those protocols could fail. This is the central fear for military and political leaders on both sides, that a war no one wants could begin by accident. The very presence of a rapid reaction force designed for immediate action increases this risk as it shortens the decision-making cycle and leaves little room for hesitation or diplomatic restraint. Russia, for its part, may seek to avoid a direct military confrontation by resorting to gray zone tactics. Unable to match the US in conventional force projection, Moscow could launch a series of cyber attacks against Polish and NATO infrastructure, targeting power grids, communication networks, or logistical hubs. They could also use disinformation campaigns to sow discord within the NATO alliance and undermine public support for the US deployment. Russia might also use its own special operations forces or proxies to harass the US troops with low-level attacks, probing for weaknesses and testing resolve without triggering a full-scale military response. This form of unconventional warfare is designed to drain resources, create confusion, and chip away at the political will of the US and its allies. The presence of the US task force forces Russia into this type of asymmetric response, highlighting the new complex nature of great power competition. Ultimately, the deployment of this elite US force marks a profound turning point in the conflict. It is a powerful symbol that the era of proxy wars and indirect confrontation is over. The United States has placed a clear and unambiguous red line on the ground, a line that Russia can see, and a line that is defended by a lethal and capable force. This action not only reaffirms the US's commitment to its NATO allies, but also serves as a chilling reminder that the war in Ukraine is not just a regional conflict, but a direct and dangerous standoff between two of the world's great powers. This high-stakes maneuver will forever change the geopolitical landscape of Europe, and its ultimate outcome will determine whether the world enters a new era of stability or a period of unprecedented conflict.